Honor mode is the hardest difficulty Baldur's Gate 3 has to offer, adding a whole bunch of new legendary actions, changing already established mechanics, and worst of all, making it so you have one autosave that should you fail on, the run ends. It's already a tough challenge, but to make things harder, we're gonna see if we can do it with just one character. Oh, and it's my first time experiencing this mode, plus we've got some other extra rules such as no barrelmancy, no respecking, no karmic dice, and of course, no other party members, though temporary companions such as summons are a-okay. With that being said, it goes a long way towards helping out if you like and subscribe, and it's always deeply appreciated. Now, on to character creation. At the request of many, we'll be playing as a Dark Urge origin, meaning we also get the Haunted One background. For our race, we'll be playing as a Deep Gnome, mainly for the Gnome Cunning feature that grants advantage on all mental saves, which is an incredible defensive boost. Our class starting off is a Devotion Paladin, though we will be multiclassing later on, but starting off with good armor and weapon proficiencies, high health, and good saving throws is hard to beat. Ability scores and skill proficiencies end up looking like this, and though it may be odd for now with charisma and con pumped to the moon at the expense of the other scores, trust me when I say the payoff will be worth it. Then we sculpt our handsome protagonist to perfection, and after a vote decide on a strangely foreboding name. Thus begins the adventures of the Bald Urge the First. We awaken on a burning nautiloid with an illithid parasite in our head and memories of our past life out of it, though we do have an overwhelming desire to kill, specifically legendary creatures, so we must have been some sort of big game hunter in our past life. Regardless, we continue on our merry way and find a brain in need of freeing, one that tells us we gotta get to the helm, and since our brain is out of sorts, we decide to trust this one. As we continue on, we get jumped by this strange Gith soldier who joins us alongside our brain to fight against some imps. We're pretty sure she's a legendary creature though, so while she's not looking, we take her armor and send her to an early demise. The imps, of course, really aren't hard to clear out even without her help. Then we arrive at the helm just in time to see the world's worst mind flayer die to a couple imps, but on the off chance they are in fact just that deadly, we start a mad dash towards the control panel at the end of the room, whereupon we tickle some tentacles, get melted by some future prey, receive even more brain damage to add to our collection, and wake up the next day feeling chipper as ever. The Bald Urge gets exploring his surroundings and finds some intellect devourers in the way. Not wanting to have what little remains of our intellect devoured, we just sneak right past. And here we find a weakened mind flayer that gives inspiration and a bunch of XP for killing it. Enough XP for level 2, which grants 2 first level spell slots, the ability to use divine smites, a whole host of spells, and last but not least our defense fighting style. This bad boy is the start of something beautiful, an unkillable defensive build, and this gets us a little closer to that state with a +1 to our AC so long as we're wearing armor. Continuing on, we come across a hand that seems to be stuck in a portal and desperately wants out, so we perform the first of many heroic deeds to come and hack it free. This grants both another inspiration point and also for some reason breaks our oath, causing a frightening Scottish man to show up and berate us. He is also kind enough to give us the powers of an Oathbreaker paladin, which will mainly become relevant later, but it's nice of him to give us some power as a consolation. After chatting to him, we head to our camp just to grab the mask of the shapeshifter, which will help us quite a lot, as well as a cool cape to make us look extra fly. A little further down the road and we find some goblins with really bad aim attacking a camp full of people, but even bad aim still manages to hit the local cannon fodder. The fight kicks off with us jumping to their aid as the hero we probably are, and thanks to the Shield of Faith we'll be concentrating on for most of this playthrough, the first couple attacks miss us. We down a Hill Giant elixir to boost up our strength and hopefully also make this fight go a little quicker. And a couple of our rather average allies go down here and there, but before you know it we clean up the last of the goblins with no problem. Once inside we punch a rude dude, convince some spellcasters to stay and protect their people from the goblin threat, find out the druids don't much like the ton of tieflings scratching in their grove, and save a child named Arabella from the most murderous of all the druids. Further in, we have a quick chat with Nettie, a frankly horrendous healer who asks us to unalive ourselves should our symptoms get worse, and tells us of a more helpful druid named Halcyon stuck in the nearby goblin camp. Once she's gone, we yoink the nearby parasite on her desk since our brain says it'll be handy later. We also learn how to play every instrument ever while chatting with this cool bard named Alfira, then learn that the local cutthroat children want the druid's shiny idol stolen in exchange for a cool ring, and try and talk to the local wildlife, but the urge kicks in and, well, it must have been a legendary creature. Yeah, definitely. Anyways, elsewhere in the wilderness we find what is definitely a legendary creature in the form of Raphael, a devil who really wants us to come begging to him for help with our tadpole. Thankfully though, he doesn't yap at us for too long and he gets the gist after we tell him to bugger off for the millionth time. Up in the same area, we get the Silver Pendant, which allows us to cast the Guidance cantrip whenever we want, something that will be insanely helpful going forward. Speaking of helpful things, deeper in the woods we find a couple of fishy folk standing over a soon-to-be corpse. Turns out we can use our tadpole to exert control over them since they're part of something called the Cult of the Absolute, the same bad guys the goblins are working for. We send them off to go hunt down the owlbear that got their brother and yoink the parasite right out of his corpse. Then our shattered psyche lets us know it's a good idea to start being a drow using that mask of the shapeshifter we got earlier. Sure enough, when we get to the nearby town, our drow form is able to scare off all the goblins in the area. This is enough to grant us level 3, and we reach out to the closest fiend to grab our first level in Warlock, granting a special first level spell slot that restores on short rest and a couple cantrips in the form of Eldritch Blast and Minor Illusion. Both extraordinarily useful, and since our charisma is so high, EB is a fantastic way to deal range damage. The spells we take aren't too relevant at this level, but with the fiend as our patron we gain Dark One's Blessing, which gives temp HP equal to our charisma mod plus Warlock level each time we kill anything, and we'll be doing that a lot. In a hidden basement in one of the buildings in this town, we grab an interesting looking scroll as well as a spooky book called the Necromancy of Thay. Upon using the scroll of Summon Quasit, we conjure the scintillating shovel and make the first magnanimous mistake of this run in renaming her to Fork. The reason this is so bad is because normally as a warlock we could talk to her again and gain the ability to summon her once per short rest, but the game bugs out if you name her Fork and you just don't get that option. Oh well, there's nothing we can do about it now. We just need to make sure we get the most out of her while she's here. And we do that by sending her into the grove and having her attack the strange ox. Naturally, she gets obliterated just a moment later, but that was part of the plan too. Since now we can go right up to the ox and it asks us to trade with it, allowing us to buy the shapeshifter's boon ring. This bad boy grants an extra 1d4 to all checks so long as we're shapeshifted, which works with our mask, but it gets even more crazy since you only need to have this ring on when you first shapeshift, meaning you could just swap it out right afterwards. And if we're smart about this, we can get what is basically a permanent 1d4 bonus to all checks. With that wonderful item gotten, we scare off every goblin between here and their camp, and when we finally arrive, the Absolute assails us with visions of her chosen 3 commanders. Thankfully, the exposition stops when this nice young stranger shows up to scare them all off with a cool Rubik's Cube before we decide to call it a night. When we awake the next day, we find we're able to absorb the parasites we've been picking up to grow even stronger, granting us the ability to unlock some illithid powers, namely Luck of the Far Realms and Favorable Beginnings. Further in the camp, we free an imprisoned Volothap, a famous and knowledgeable wizard who will be an incredible help in our journey, though likely not how you expect. Then we do some exploring and find a hidden ladder descending all the way to the depths of the Underdark, but we'll stick to the goblin camp for a bit longer before we start gallivanting around there. Mainly because we want to get a brand from one of the leaders here to convince them and any underlings that we mean no harm when secretly we mean a lot of harm. One such group of underlings is these fine fellows here, a group of ogres acting as mercenaries currently enlisted by the cult. Thanks to all of our bonuses, it's not hard to convince them to fight for us instead when we call, granting us yet more inspiration in the process. Afterwards, we check in on our other new ally back at camp, Volo, who we immediately try and steal from and fail, but this is what makes having him around so good, because he just saunters right back to where he normally stands no matter how many times we fail, meaning we have a source of unlimited gold and scrolls so long as we're patient. Later in the evening, Alfira shows up at our camp, and I know the title says Lonewolf and so did the intro, but I think just this once we'll have a companion. Maybe she'll stick around in camp, but I mean we owe her at least that much for teaching us every instrument ever. So we let her stay and call it a night, and the next morning resume our I guess she must have been another legendary creature. Man, this place is filthy with them. Well, at least we got our inspiration. Moving on, the Burge, that's the Baldur, continues his heroic journey, saving a counselor from a burning building, though failing to save someone else, and also scaring off a whole scouting party of ghastly Githyanki with the help of a Gith disguise. Our heroic efforts get us all the way to level 4 and 2 in Warlock, which gives another Warlock spell slot, a spell in the form of Armor Vagathis, and 2 Eldritch Invocations, Agonizing Blast, and Devil's Sight. Agonizing Blast makes our range damage much more reliable, and even though it won't be our focus, it still gives us versatility. Whereas Devil's Sight makes darkness in the future a viable defensive option for when we get in a big pickle. Now that we're a bit stronger, we're feeling ready to explore the Underdark and stumble across a Myconid colony. In said colony, we talk to their sovereign spa who lets us know all about the nearby Dwergar who've been wreaking havoc on the locals and asks us to deal with them. Since we feel like we probably used to be somewhat heroic, we agree to get around to it, but when we actually come across them in our drow disguise, it seems a good way to get some info, so we play along with their assumptions about us being on their side. It seems their main force is just across the lake, so while their backs are turned, we steal their boat and get a sailing. Oh, and we take a quick detour to cut a deal with a false god being worshipped by a bunch of fish folk for even more experience. As we get to exploring the Dwergar HQ known as Grimforge, it's evident that most of the Dwergar don't like the absolute leader, a true soul named Nier who's managed to get himself stuck in a cave-in. So we use our mad persuasion skills combined with our roll boosting items to make a deal with them. We free Nier and they help slaughter him. Which is an extra good thing because we can smell the legendary stench wafting from where he's stuck. All we gotta do is take out the scrying eye first and foremost. Then we pop open the cave-in and get in position, when out comes sauntering the narcissistic ne'er-do-well Nier, proving just why he's gotta go. As the fight kicks off, the Dwergar defectors join on our side, though for the moment we're still a little outnumbered. It doesn't help that both Nier and his goons are able to mind control the few allies that we do have. Though when our charmed allies hit us, they break free from the control and immediately get back to destroying the enemies. We do a little shoving of our own to help turn the tides before dashing as far away from the fight as we can. Our plan works out when one of the baddies runs over to us and starts wailing, since right after he's close enough to the other patrolling guards and they join the fighting on our side. Meaning the rest of the fight sorts itself out pretty well with our allies overwhelming the enemies, and Nier not doing much at all in classic Nier fashion. He does have his legendary action, which is a sort of retaliation on every hit past the first each round, but with him being outnumbered 5-1, that's our first legendary hunt down. After the fight, we get a tadpole from his corpse, letting us unlock concentrated blast, not that we'll use it. Continuing on, we grab a mold for the forge up ahead, and we also sneak past some enemies so we can grab mithril ore to use in it as well. A little further up, we find the Grimforge itself, capable of making some really killer gear. Once everything is in place, we bring the whole platform down to where it needs to be, then we teleport back up to the top of the waypoint that we grabbed and shoot the lava valve from up there. And out comes our second legendary hunt that we could feel coming a mile away. Grim, the Guardian of the Forge. The clobbering construct can't do a darn thing to us while we're up here, so we fall into a pattern of superheating him with the lava, luring him into the center with our minor illusion, and then shooting the hammer lever to crush him. The first time this happens, a bunch of magma mephits spawn, and they can get to us, but if we make sure to move far enough away, they'll focus entirely on Grim. When they're all out of the way, we rinse and repeat with the old crush and hammer strategy on our rampant robot until he too has joined our collection of conquered creatures. With the forge clear, we grab yet another pair of mold and ore to use to make the adamantine splint armor and the adamantine shield. Both of these make us immune to critical hits, but the splint armor also has an AC of 18, reduces all damage by 2, and when we get hit in melee, our attacker is sent reeling for 3 turns, which reduces their attack rolls by 1 per turn remaining, making it all the more wild that the shield sends people reeling for 2 turns even when they miss us. These are obviously both incredible defensive gets, and it puts our AC up to a whopping 21. Elsewhere in the area, we stumble across some mimics, which we can kill by just standing up on the nearby cliff since for some reason they can't climb. I wonder how they got down there. Regardless, our addled brain has led us well since this gets us the wondrous gloves. Now, we're not going to be taking any levels in Bard, so part of this item is useless, but the extra 1 AC makes us even tankier, and we're getting to the point where we're nigh unhittable. These little fellas also give enough experience for level 5, and our third and final level in Warlock. This bumps our Warlock spell slots up to level 2, and gives us the ever-important Darkness spell alongside swapping out an earlier Charm person for Cloud of Daggers. Like was mentioned previously, Darkness is our get out of jail free card if we find ourselves taking on fights that we're not quite ready for otherwise. Burge also gets the Pact of the Blade, allowing us to summon or bind to weapons. These weapons then have Charisma be their main stat for attacks and damage, which means we finally have good melee options without elixirs. And since this is level 5, our proficiency bonus goes up to 3 and all of our cantrips become better, meaning Eldritch Blast now fires 2 beams. Next up, our Shattered Brain takes us over to the swamp. Call it a hunch or an urge, but something is hidden here behind all of these elementals. Indeed, with the help of an invis potion, we grab a note talking about how Kaga from the Grove is in fact colluding with some shady shadow druids. With the note in hand, we fast travel out of there before we can get caught and go to confront the lady. When we do, the shadow druids appear to wreak some havoc, but we're able to convince Kaga and the other Emerald Grove druids to join our side against them, which of course means that they get absolutely clobbered in about 30 seconds flat. Since this means the druids are trying to kill the tieflings a little little less, it also means they care about their idol a little less, so we can drag it into a cloud of darkness and then yoink it and fast travel away before anyone comes to accuse us, letting us turn the idol into Maul the Thiefling Kid in exchange for the Ring of Protection, which grants an extra +1 to AC and saving throws. For those keeping score, we're now at 23 AC by default and 25 with Shield of Faith active. This ring will be on us for pretty much the entire playthrough. Since we seem to be getting into the habit of stealing things, we also yoink this fun looking box from some folks who clearly don't want it that much. And conveniently enough, just a few minutes later, we find a lady who's willing to reward us handsomely in exchange for this box that she happened to be looking for. Mainly, this just lets us buy the Gloves of Thievery that give advantage on sleight of hand checks. We'll throw these bad boys on whenever we need to do some unsavory undercover activities. Almost as a divine reward for our progress, that cool Rubik's Cube that one girl had shows up in our pocket one evening and joins us for the rest of our journey. But now it's time to start cleaning up the goblin camp. We down an elixir of vigilance to boost initiative, as well as put on some more damaging gear with the Sword of Screams and the Caustic Band. Then we sneak up on Priestess Gut and use our Luck of the Far Realms and a Divine Smite to do a whole lot of damage. She does survive, but with a speed potion fueled Cloud of Daggers, she is down for the count, and with another tadpole we get Call the Weak as our newest power, an incredibly powerful damage boost. Before we go after the rest of the camp, we see a priest offering an interesting ritual, but once completed we get the Leviathar's Love permanent buff. It's nothing fancy, but it does give a little boost when we're at low health, which is when we need it the most. Afterwards, we get to clearing out the goons littering the place, so that we've got room to kite when we take on the head honchos. Thanks to our incredibly high AC, we don't really have to worry about the small fries, so long as we steer clear of the merchants at least. Before you know it, they're all largely dealt with, and we're up in the rafters fighting the legendary Dror Ragslin and his small fry. His legendary action activates when we target an ally of our own, so it's about as irrelevant as it can get. Once again, nobody can really hit us, so we just get to shredding down all of these goblin goons until it's just this boorish booyag up on the rafters with us. And then the unthinkable happens. She throws a void bulb, something I had never seen happen before in my hundreds of hours of playing, and we fail to save and we die from full health. Let me tell you, I was incredibly distraught. We were practically unkillable, and getting one shot feels incredibly bad, but luckily a new hero was ready to take up the mantle. I give to you the Bald Urge II, exact same build and race, just a little less hair and a lot more handsome. We do everything again in basically the same order, with some minor exceptions, such as not renaming Shovel to Fork so we can actually resummon her. And we take a few more rests, which means this grotesque gremlin from our past shows up to offer us a cool cape as a reward for killing all those legendary creatures, specifically Alfira. Before you say anything, I know it's extremely optimal to use in Lone Wolf runs, but I don't enjoy using it, so I'm not going to. Either way, now we're back up to the rafters in Dror's room, but this time we've got Featherfall active, so we can't get one shot. Burge II starts to get revenge on all the baddies by just shoving them down and getting the odd Eldritch Blast on Dror himself. By the time he actually reaches us up here, he's just low enough for a critical 2nd level smite to obliterate him, and we've got a 3rd trophy for our continuing collection. It takes a little while to clean up the rest of the goons, but with Featherfall active for the whole time, we've got nothing to worry about. Before continuing on, we also grab Psionic Backlash using the tadpole we got from Dror for a nice bit of extra damage and a way to use our reaction reliably. When we're ready, we send in Shovel to grab the attention of the last goblin leader, Minthara, and then we just start shooting her from on top of a nearby wall. She does eventually catch up to our Quasit companion and take them out, but she doesn't seem to know how to get up to us afterwards, so we can just shoot her a few times and take her out once and for all. For killing her, we get arguably one of the greatest boosts to our survivability in the entire run, the Boots of Striding. These little booties give us a minor speed boost whenever we start concentrating on a spell, but more importantly make it so we can't be knocked prone or forcibly moved so long as we're concentrating. I'm sure you could guess why we'd want an item like this, and it pairs phenomenally with Shield of Faith, which lasts until a long rest. We also get yet another illithid power in the form of Force Tunnel, which will be very nice now and then. Moving on, when we get back to camp, the Druid Halsin is there to greet us and thank us for defeating the goblins. Unfortunately, he can't help us with our parasite problem, but he does tell us where more legendary creatures are to be found. Moonrise Towers, the absolutist headquarters. It's good to know about, but that means heading to the Shadowcursed lands, and there's still more we want to do here. But now that the goblins are gone, we can head to the mountain pass and buy the Periaptive Wound Closure from Lady Esther. We'll be wearing this amulet for pretty much the entire run, since its effect of maxing out any healing we receive, including from potions, is just so darn strong and makes healing stress-free. At the nearby temple, we find some Gith who are looking for some sort of weapon and interrogating the few absolute cultists that remain. We're able to sneak inside their crush using a hidden entrance so as to not attract attention and grab the waypoint so we can come back later. Because first, we'd like to go fulfill Sovereign Spa's request and destroy the Dwergar by the lake. It's really not too hard for us, especially with the help of the Defender Flail which we acquired from the crush and will be using temporarily. Upon reporting back to the Sovereign, he gives us Bliss Spores till our next rest, basically giving an extra 1d6 to all rolls, meaning we're now prepared to head back to the crush and plop ourselves in their resident Brain Blaster, since our cranial trauma seems to have done wonders for us in the past. This little machine has us making 3 saving throws, 1 for each mental stat, but with all of our bonuses coming from the Bliss Spores, an Elixir of Heroism, and Bless, as well as our Gnome Cunning, we have no problem in passing them all. Burge does blow up a little bit because of this, but it's well worth it since from here on out all of our Illithid powers are going to be using a bonus action instead of an action. Oh, and 3 more tadpoles in this room give us Psionic Overload, Stage Fright, and Repulsor to further improve ourselves and destroy our brain even more since we're becoming more and more convinced that the brain trauma is actually the source of all of our power. With power in tow, our addled brain directs us to the next target on our legendary list, a harmless old lady living in the swamp who's kidnapped a young woman. Although it does turn out that she's not so harmless, but she is rightfully afraid and runs deep into her basement, leaving us to break her raging redcaps in the meanwhile. And we also rumble and tumble our way through some like-minded confused cronies in the basement. None of us know how we got here, but one of us is leaving. When we finally get down to the bottom, Burge pops an invisibility potion to free the young woman Mayrina while staying hidden. Then we use darkness where we're pretty sure the hideous hag is hiding. Afterwards, we try to reveal her with an alchemist fire and miss, but get her with the second one. Her legendary action, and all the fire, makes this a bit tedious since whenever we cast Eldritch Blast, she summons another clone and shuffles her location. But she can't actually target us while we're in the darkness, and we've got speed potions galore to make this go by fast enough that we don't need to worry about running out of spell slots. Once she gets knocked down to below 30 HP, she offers us a deal. Ethel will give us power in exchange for letting her go with Mayrina. We're here to absolutely dominate these legendary creatures though, so we intimidate her into giving us both Mayrina and the power-up, meaning we get a permanent +1 to our charisma, setting it up to 18, and our modifier to +4, basically making every single thing that we do better. We also get a little trinket called Bitter Divorce in the back room, which we use to resurrect Mayrina's husband Connor, though not as intact as she'd originally hoped. To spare her the tragedy of having to travel alongside her undead spouse, we take the burden onto ourselves. Our sixth sense then leads us towards a spider cave in search of yet another triumphant trophy. We've just got to get past some run-of-the-mill spiders first. Afterwards, we find ourselves in the den of the phase spider matriarch, and since her legendary action entombs anyone who attacks her hatchlings, we make sure to destroy all of the eggs first from stealth. Then we destroy a web the matriarch is standing on, making her take a ton of fall damage before the fight kicks off proper. As soon as we get a turn, we blow on Lump's Bonehorn, and no, that's not a euphemism, it summons our ogre allies as distractions. Then we drop our arachnid amiga right on top of one of her underlings, almost killing both. The ogres start putting in the legwork, so to speak, on one of the spiders. Well, the queen does her darndest to get back at us. But a moment later, the last little goon goes down, and with just the big lady herself left, she doesn't stand much of a chance at all. And to make a good hunt even better, we convince the ogres to join us for yet another fight in the future. There's also this super cool shiny rock we grab that Burge promptly jams into the Necromancy of Thay book that we grabbed earlier to pop it open. After a series of saving throws that we're pretty darn good at are succeeded, this gives us some forbidden knowledge, and by that I mean the forbidden knowledge permanent buff, boosting our wisdom saving throws and wisdom checks for the rest of the run by a +1, which one might start to call overkill if you believe in having too much of a good thing. We take a quick break from the legendary hunt to eradicate the local gnoll population, just as a little treat, since their ears can make us run real quick, aka we can make speed potions out of them. And one of them has a tadpole that lets us unlock ability drain, which is an important piece for this build for reasons that you'll see later. Then the hunt continues, sorta. Burge talks to Sovereign Glut, a misplaced Myconid in the Underdark who's down to whoop some booty by our side. He has the remarkable ability to reanimate pretty much anything under his control, including this mighty Minotaur we slew a moment ago. With the squad in tow, including Connor, we chase down the Boulette, who really feels like they should be a legendary creature, but if they have a legendary action, it never made an appearance. Either way, we get to some Boulette brawling and land a couple good hits, but for the most part it's a comedy of errors where we miss and miss and miss again. All the while the Boulette wastes its turns going after our Minotaur pal, which we can always get another of, till eventually a couple more misses seals the deal and the bullet vanishes underground to heal up and run away elsewhere in the Underdark. It's not too tricky to track it down though, and when we do catch up to it, we get quite the drop on it. It continues to largely ignore us, so we can get all of our bad luck out of the way while it wails on the Minotaur, till eventually we land one more hit that we turn into a crit smite and obliterate it with. We don't get much of a reward from this fight, but along the way to our next hunt, we find the bestest boy Scratch out in the wild and leave him our scent so we can join our ever-expanding hunting party when he wants. Hey, do you remember those two strangers we convinced to avenge their brother by killing an owlbear earlier? Yeah, turns out they've just been waiting for us to show up for like a week, and now that we're here, it's rumbling time. To make things even more interesting, we decide to summon our ogre mercenaries to have a fun little free-for-all. Then we just cast darkness in the corner to let everyone else work things out. Shovel puts the fear of God into this owlbear with a 4 damage hit, causing her to summon her mate using her legendary action. The cultists meanwhile just kinda mess with the ogres, which is funny at first, but we want this fight to move along, so we eradicate both of them with an EB. It becomes pretty clear pretty fast that the owlbears are gonna win this fight as they take out a couple of the ogres, so we start blasting away at them to ensure they don't win by too much. And when the last ogre falls, both of the owlbears are nice and low, just as we'd hoped. They do try to hit us, but between the darkness blinding them and our incredible AC, they get no such luck, leaving them ripe for a good divine smite on one, and a stage fight on the other, causing them to finish themselves off. Still counts as our kill though. You know, we've done a lot of killing, and it's about time we get some more brain damage to power up, so we head to the Myconid colony where we find a friendly mind flayer willing to help us out if we gather the right ingredients. So we head to the nearby abandoned arcane tower and pick up an anti-magic flower, just to turn off the security measures to allow us to explore the rest of it as well. Whereupon we grab the ingredients we need for our liquid form mind melter, do a little bit of light reading, and head to the roof where we find this tower is not as abandoned as we thought. But after a brief rap battle against our automated opponent Bernard, he relaxes and considers us his superior. He is a legendary creature though, and we would love to collect a trophy from him, so we hop to it with a divine smite crit, only to follow it up with a bonus action repulsor, defenestrating this dunce all the way to the ground where he instantly dies. That was certainly easy. The remaining mechanical mob literally can't hit us because our AC is simply too high for them, and we've got crit immunity, so even nat 20s don't do a thing, letting us just take them out one by one while they stand about with less movement than a shooting gallery. Besides another head mounted on our wall, we also get a down the mind melter as a reward, and our theory continues to be proven as we get the survival instinct power for doing this. It's nothing crazy, but more survivability is always nice to have. Now our brain is as addled as it could possibly get, for now, which means we're as powerful as we can get, and there's one more legendary hunt for us to do. Thankfully it takes place in the creche, and there's a little puzzle that we solve near the roof by putting a warhammer, a mace, and a battle axe on these little pedestals that grants the Morning Lord's radiance upon completion. This is a nice bit of extra radiant damage on our melee attacks so long as we're in the area, until our next long rest at least. We also grab a little emblem that belonged to the previous owners of this temple, and with as much bravery as we can muster, we head to the bottom of the creche to find Inquisitor Wargaz, who's very interested in our astral artifact, as is his false god Lich Queen Vlaakith, who tells us there's someone inside of our artifact who they really want dead, and we're not really in a position to refuse, so we acquiesce. Once we do get inside, we find the person who's been appearing in our dreams. Apparently they're real, and not just real, but they've been using some sort of power to protect us from being turned into a mind flayer, which means for better or worse, they're on our side, for now at least, but our brain tells us to not trust them entirely. Choosing to not kill them means they reward us with a bless effect for the upcoming fight, and we also prep by conjuring Shovel and Connor as decoys. When we step outside, the fight kicks off, our final legendary showdown, and we instantly get shot in the face, though thankfully not for much. Another enemy tries to hit us with a psychic blast, but our mind has grown strong at resisting trauma, and we've got a psychic resistance elixir active to boot. Shovel gets to bullying one of the ghastly Gith, and we see Wargaz's legendary action in, well, action. Twice per round when something happens to him or his goons, he summons a mind claw that deals psychic damage, and if they hit, the big man can leech off their target to gain more power and make that person vulnerable to called Psychic. Shovel gets got herself a moment later, and we resort to hiding in darkness and using speed potions to take out the goons as fast as we can. Connor also gets obliterated a moment later, but we're able to get some sort of vengeance by taking out yet another crony. One big problem that we're having is the Mind Claws can't be blinded and love swinging at us, but this problem is largely negated by the fact that we have 26 AC from all of our items and speed pots. Over the next few turns, we focus on taking out some more goons, but by the time we do, our Darkness Cloud is more of a Mind Claw cloud, so we get focusing on the big man in the hopes to stop this madness. Nicely enough, the claws don't actually make opportunity attacks, but they do still threaten us, giving disadvantage on EBs if we're near them, so each turn is a little puzzle on how to hit Wargaz. After a while of this tedium, he is nice and low, so we trigger an opportunity attack from him so he doesn't have a reaction to parry a Divine Smite crit finisher. And then the remaining lackey does by far the most damage out of the whole fight to us, before we show him the wrath of Burge too. Laying on the corpse of one of these terrible thugs is the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, our new long-term helmet. This dangerous diadem grants us the Arcane Synergy condition for 2 turns when we inflict a condition, which is basically guaranteed every turn thanks to ability drain. For the uninitiated, Arcane Synergy makes our weapon attacks deal extra damage equal to our spellcasting mod, which, as you guessed it, is Charisma. Comboing with Pact of the Blade, this means our weapons add twice our Charisma mod to their damage, increasing our output by a lot. In a side passage that was hidden, we find a secret route leading deeper in where we can almost see the impressive power pouring out. At the end of this hallway, a weapon befitting the Bald Urge awaits, but to make sure none of the security measures blow us up, we pop in the emblem that we got earlier first. With that, we're able to obtain the wondrous weapon that we'll be using for almost the entirety of the rest of the run, the Blood of Lathander. The divine power flowing through this +3 mace gives it a lot of extra effects, mainly letting us use a Sunbeam once per long rest for free, giving a chance to blind all nearby fiends and undead, which will be very useful soon. And once per long rest, if we get reduced to 0 health, it instead heals us and anyone nearby. This last effect is the reason why we hold on to it so tightly. While there is more damaging weapons, the chance to avoid an unforeseen killing blow is incredibly hard to give up on. Feeling more powerful and having our brain more fractured than ever before, we know for sure that if we weren't a big game hunter before we lost our memory, we certainly are now. And as we head off to the Shadowcurse lands through Grimforge, we just can't wait to see all the trophies that will adorn our walls next. Burge II bumbles his way right into the next act, and the Shadowcurse lands, whose curse seems to permanently permeate this place, but with our shiny new mace, we've got nothing to worry about from its lesser effects. However, almost immediately as we set out on the trail, we stumble across some harpers wandering through the darkness. And right when we reveal ourselves to them, the shadows come alive and abduct one, revealing why exactly most people fear the dark. Burge is not most people, however, and our heroic hunter leaps into action. Unfortunately, the enemies leap into action just a little bit quicker, instantly breaking our concentration and whacking around pretty much all of our allies, with them not missing a single attack. When it does get to us, we start bonking away with a whopping 16 damage. It might be a little on the slow side, but it's not like they're really able to hit us thanks to all of our AC, just our weak little allies, and who needs those? This little routine we develop keeps up for the following turns as well, with the first of the shadows going down, and the first of the horrendous harpers going down too, not to harp on them too much. As we're taking our sweet time picking off the shadows, more of the harpers go down till there's just one left. And our shadow-strewn slaughterfest continues, with the shock of a lifetime when the last harper not only survives, but also even takes out one of the baddies, with us as usual delivering the death blow. The hapless harper then informs us of a hunting lodge awaiting our arrival out in this darkness, tells us to follow them to it, and then leaves without so much as waiting for us to loot our hard-earned trophies. However, a moment later, Burge arrives at the Last Light Inn and meets Jaheira, who is not so pleased at our arrival, since apparently stuffing your brain full of parasites is abnormal and not okay to do in public spaces or something like that. Thankfully, Maul from the Grove has made it here safe and sound and is more than willing to vouch for us. Since we're now alright by Jaheira, we are therefore alright by Quartermaster Tally, who sells us the Cloak of Protection. This phenomenal little trinket gives us both a +1 to AC and saving throws, making us even tankier, which means this is the first and last cloak we will ever need. With some minor shopping out of the way, we have a quick drink with Jaheira in the hopes this will blend our brain further. It doesn't, but rather she chooses to blend our brain the old-fashioned way, with a good old exposition dump. Mainly by telling us about Ketheric Thorm, an immortal undead general brought back to life seemingly to lead the Absolute's army. His headquarters is Moonrise Towers, so with our next destination in mind, we swing into action. Though, before we can, she tells us about a cleric upstairs who should help us out, but our brain warns us that's bad news waiting to happen, so we ignore her advice. Along the way to Moonrise, we meet some more Harpers, ready to help us steal a way of conquering the Shadow Curse from a cultist convoy. Sure enough, we find them a moment later being led by a freaky fellow mental maniac. But this is Burge's forte. No one knows how a mangled mind works better than our hero, who makes one charisma check to get a hold of their special lantern, and a second charisma check to send them marching into the curse unprotected. And just like that, our first legendary creature is down. We'll grab our trophy later. In the meantime, we investigate their lantern and find a pixie trapped inside, who our brain insists we free, and upon being freed is kind enough to reward us with a more permanent blessing to resist the curse. Continuing down the road, we arrive at the hip and happening Moonrise Towers, where inside the main hall is General Thorm, an immortal and legendary creature passing judgment on the goblins from Act 1. They don't much like what he has to say, however, he likes their reaction a whole lot less, before meandering off to go on the world's longest smoke break, leaving us free to explore and find a group of gnolls being telepathically controlled, but with one easy check we break said control and sick them on their handler, who is kind enough to drop another space gummy to fuel our addiction, unlocking Displace more as a means to upgrade our Call the Weak than anything else. And just down at the docks nearby, we find a man guarding a couple more of these gummies. He is pretty easy to scare away with a check of his own, letting us walk right up to his precious cargo and grab it, catching the attention of the other guard who turns around at the worst moment, but with a narrow escape we are free and clear. These two extra parasites get us transfused health and Shield of Thralls as extra tools in our arsenal, though once again more for Call the Weak than their own merits. With a little more power in hand, we've got an urge, one that calls us to hunt down some legendary creatures. It's a good thing that nearby the towers we find the gold-clad Garingoth Thorm, who is absolutely bananas and madly obsessed with gold, but as we've established, no one knows quite how to get these malicious madmen to blow themselves up like the Baldur II. Our hunt is quickly completed with a self-explosion of gold and experience, with nary a drop of blood spilled. To celebrate, our adult thoughts take us to a tainted tavern wherein we find our next mark, Thisbald Thorm, who has clearly seen better days. He pours us a vile-looking pint and asks us for the simple payment of a story in return. Naturally, we only pretend to drink his concoction, which isn't hard with all of our roll-boosting gear and a little bit of luck. And then we get storytelling with the few intact memories still floating around inside our old noggin. The sheer maddening nature of our train of thought does quite the number on poor Thisbald, and just like that, another Thorm is down for the count. A moment later, we commit mass murder on a murder to bump us up to level 7. This takes its form as level 4 in Paladin, granting another Lay on Hands charge, and most importantly, our first feat, which is an ability score improvement, bumping our charisma up to 20, making us much better at pretty much everything. To continue our little detour from taking out the Thorm family, we return to Moonrise and have a quick chat with Zarel, Kethric's commander in charge of this place. We trick her into trusting us, and she tells us about a super duper top secret important relic that Kethric desperately wants, locked inside of his family mausoleum where a necromancer named Balthazar is currently looking for it. Since she clearly trusts us enough for this top secret mission, we also persuade her to allow us to purchase from the tower's top secret stock. So we go have a quick chat with Lantarv downstairs to buy the Dwarven Splint Mail. This 19 AC armor reduces piercing damage we take by 1, increases strength saves and checks by 1, and most importantly increases our con by 2, giving us much more HP to work with and increasing our con saves. Since we've got a bit more power, we might as well put it to the test, so we wander to the town center where we find the cultist convoy from earlier, now undead. As soon as Karnas is close enough to Karkiss, we use Control Undead on him, letting us get him as a follower until we long rest. Then we hit as many of the goons as we can with a stage fright, which works out pretty fantastically right off the bat. Oh, and when we start swinging, we're also dealing more damage thanks to the strange conduit ring, which we'll have on whenever we want a little more oomph. It very quickly becomes apparent that these bumbling buffoons really don't stand a chance against Karnas, especially when we're here to back him up. Wanting to revel in our strength more though, we decide to hunt down some more baddies just further up the road. Unfortunately, these guys are a bit too much for Karnas to handle, and we just can't kill them quick enough to save him, so our new legendary follower goes down far too quickly. As per usual though, it takes more than common riffraff to do anything to Burge, so it's not hard for us to pick them off one by one. With the town square cleared out, we're free to walk right down the road to where we find the malicious Dr. Malice Thorm. I get the feeling this guy's license has been revoked more than a few few times. Either way, we rack our brain real hard to jog whatever sort of intelligence is still rattling around in there, and after a few uses of inspiration, we get an idea. Burge convinces the good doctor himself to act as a test subject for the nurses to improve their skills, and boy, do they need a lot of improvement. Well, sucks for him, but that is our 4th legendary creature already done, and most of the Thorn family line taken out as well. We celebrate by using our musical skills to play a little jig, accidentally waking up a coma patient in the process, who somehow knows about how to actually lift the shadow curse. All we need is for Halcyon to open a portal to rescue some kid named Thaniel. Our hunting instincts let us know that Thaniel should be able to lead us to our next prey, so we really want to rescue him as well. To prepare, we summon a fire elemental, use our shield of thralls on ourselves, cast Sleet Storm where we expect the baddies to come from, and fire a darkness arrow where Halcyon is going to conjure the portal. Halcyon gets yapping about how we need to defend the portal, but when the conversation ends, I realize for whatever reason this one conversation doesn't pause our spell timers like every other conversation in the game. So the enemies show up and we are woefully unprepared, but as things get underway, we send our fire elemental off to one side to occupy some shadows. Meanwhile, we use a darkness arrow on the portal to hopefully stop archers from shooting at it, plus a speed potion fueled wall of stone scroll that comes out partially invisible, but I promise is actually there. A few enemies waste their turns hitting our summons and dashing around the place, but things start to get dire when a bajillion enemies show up at the end of this round. Our enraged elemental takes out a few more with a blast, and we use a scroll of Ice Storm to take out a bunch and make some ice in the hopes that they'll slip on it. This triggers our Bloodlust elixir, letting us use our 2nd action for a Sunbeam, and our 3rd for a Divine Smite critical hit on the nearby Wraith. The ice plan works out phenomenally, with everyone trying to get in range of the portal slipping and sliding, letting us on our next turn use a lightning bolt scroll to take out some more unimpressive undead, finish off the worrisome wraith, and tickle the shadows that are tussling with the fire elemental, while of course refreshing our speed pot. Unfortunately, the ice melts at this point and all the enemies are able to dash right up to the edge of the portal's platform. Since our darkness arrow is also gone, we try and refresh it, but it dissipates into pure nothing for literally no reason. So we use a cold glyph of warding scroll on the gathered masses to deal good damage and refreeze all the water, followed up by a stage fright just to be extra safe. Our fire elemental finally goes down after distracting all the shadows for a good while, and the rest of the baddies finally start swinging at both our wall and ourselves. When it gets back to Burge, we start with an Eldritch Blast on an archer who can shoot our portal, and then we use a Thunder Wave to damage and yeet away most of the melee guys. Then we use a Confusion on them to doubly make sure nobody can do anything on this last round, and for good measure, shove off a dude who resisted our Thunder Wave. The only one who actually fires at the portal is a lone archer who resisted Confusion. The rest either skip through their turns or swing at us, meaning just like that, the portal survives and Halcyon returns. But our hard work is far from over as Halcyon reveals Thaniel is still missing something, a piece of himself, so now we gotta track down his missing half, his legendary half, which is in the form of Oliver, who is not going to come willingly with us and instead jumps into a portal of his own. Naturally, we follow after. The portal palooza continues on the other side as we face off against Oliver with Shovel and Connor at our heels. Daddy, and yes, that's really his name, uses an AoE attack on us, killing Shovel, which bugs and triggers Ollie's legendary action for some reason, creating yet more AoE damage. Connor also goes down to a few crits, but other than the damage we took from the bugged legendary action, we are A-okay, thanks to our protection from evil and good. We start off with a repulsor, killing most of the gremlin's goons, and when they die, they damage Oliver's protective barrier. Then we just focus on healing up and gaining some distance. Worth noting, we've also got an elixir that prevents us from falling asleep, so we don't have to worry about Mummy. As Oliver continues to summon more undead each turn, the existing ones fail to hit us at all, and we very slowly pick them off with EBs as we retreat further. At this point, an owlbear gets summoned too, which is actually capable of hitting us, though still not likely. With so many baddies around, we decide to go for a stage fright mixed in with our usual blasts, and this does wonders at taking out the little guys. Meanwhile, the owlbear dashes in the wrong direction since the only pathway up to us is being body blocked by a myriad of frightening children. Next turn, it manages to jump over to us, though it doesn't actually hit. We in turn take out our rage on Mummy and find Oliver's legendary action has a range limit, which means from here out, we're in the clear. Also, Arabella is here. Hey Arabella. And since we're no longer afraid of being put to sleep, we use an elixir of necrotic resistance. Now it's just time for good old-fashioned slaughtering with whatever AoE items we have on us. Eldritch Blast carries the rest of the fight after we run out, with a few rounds passing by firing beam after beam till eventually Oliver is defenseless. For some reason though, the game won't let us grab his skull for our collection and we have to let him go, but still that's another legendary hunt complete as far as Burge is concerned. After that showing, it's become clear that we need more AC. I just need it, okay? It's not a problem. So we swing by Mattis at the last light to buy some evasive shoes. Basically just giving another +1 to our AC, although we'll only be wearing these when we're absolutely certain that we don't need the boots of striding on, since those prevent knockback and prone. Side note, for whatever reason, Burge's brain melts a little more, and he just starts pulling his pants down constantly whenever he's in his natural form, so yeah. Anyways, after we're all done with that, we head towards the much anticipated mausoleum, where we encounter another one of our marks, Raphael. Unfortunately, we can't get him quite just yet. Instead, he's shown up to make himself sound important, as well as tell us that one of his enemies lies below and he asks us to kill them, but that just gives us an idea. For now though, we'll focus on just getting inside the hidden Sharon gauntlet underneath the mausoleum. All we need to do is push a few buttons. And once we get inside, to move further in, we need to solve another puzzle, but it's easily done if we approach the center button from the east and then the south, opening up all the doors around the room. One of the passages leads off to the side, towards a room full of mushrooms and an invisible cloaker, which is honestly not the most interesting hunt. It can't really do anything at all to us, and since we still don't have extra attack, it takes a while, but we get it done. Before we go on too much further, our legendary senses get tingling. Balthazar is nearby, so we use protection from evil and good to keep us safe. Sure enough, in the next room we find some friendly skeletons being controlled by the boisterous necromancer. He gets real mad when the room starts shaking, and a moment later we find out why, as a whole host of Sharon justiciars start showing up out of portals all around the room. Leaving our skeletal sidekicks to deal with them for now, we start jogging towards Balthazar's room. Unfortunately, yet more portals and justiciars show up to make things worrisome. Well, they've got numbers, we've got gloves of thievery and a bajillion lockpicks to roll an at 20 with, and a good thing too, cause by god this took a while. 20 whole lockpicks down the drain, never to be seen again. Our reward is Balthazar joining the fight on our side to even up the odds. From here, this fight is absolute chaos. Undead shooting undead, Shovel getting executed in the corner, Balthazar casting Cloud Kill on the masses and downing a speed pot. Burge, meanwhile, lets his prey exhaust himself, just standing in the corner of Balthi's bedroom while the folks outside work things out between them. This takes an extra long while since Balthazar's legendary action makes an AoE wherever anything dies that heals all undead who start their turn in it, and everyone here except us is undead. Fast forward a couple dozen rounds and it's Burge, Balthazar, and a billion baddies, and the novice necromancer is completely out of spell slots. So we just get to work clearing out the masses one slow hit at a time, and even though they really can't do anything to us, they still decide to waste their turns shooting us instead of Balthazar. We hope leaving the room will get them focusing on their real target, but it just results in them dashing to follow Burge instead. Ah well, we use a cone of cold scroll to thin most of them down, head back inside the bedroom to finish off yet another fantastic hunt, and get to work on bonking these bozos. Another dozen or so rounds to go of rinsing and repeating this, and all the justiciars bite the dust once and for all. All this hard work results in the much awaited level 8 and 5 in Paladin. This gives us another first level spell slot, 2 more second level spell slots alongside access to the respective spells. And most importantly of all, extra attack, effectively doubling our damage output, and not a moment too soon. Since we're feeling pretty confident after that display, we head back to the outside for a moment and prep for another fight by throwing on our Callous Glow Ring and downing an elixir of guileful movement to prevent us from being paralyzed or restrained. Then we send in Shovel to get a surprise round on our next legendary hunt, though she does a horrible job and ends up surprising herself somehow and gets instantly taken out. So we reset and fire off a blast and explode a few of these Shadow Curse Needle Blights to start the fight proper. On our turn, we down a potion of Glorious Vaulting, while the enemies just spend their time dashing on up to us. Next round, Burge gets the Sunbeam of a lifetime, dunking on these dunces and leaving just one goon and the shambling mound itself still alive. And our bonus action lets us jump far away, so the enemies have to skip their turns dashing yet again. With another Eldritch Blast, we finish off said goon, and with another jump we manage to force the mound to just completely fail at catching us at all. Rinse and repeat for a couple turns until eventually it does catch up to us due to some poor planning. But this just lets us do a Super Smite, aka Thunderous Smite, turned into a crit, and then a Divine Smite on top of said crit for a whole lot of damage that also knocks it prone. The combo continues with a regular smite to add insult to injury afterwards. Since it skips its turn standing up and doing nothing else, we get to finish it off with one more little bonk to its wee noggin. Before we get to our other hunts, we decide to take on the Sharan Trials in the Mausoleum to find Kethric's relic, and Burge manages to drop his trousers while performing a holy ritual to activate the Soft Step Trial, which has gotta be somewhat blasphemous. Regardless, for this one all we gotta do is stay hidden from the patrolling shadows and get to the end. Starting by jumping through this Burge-sized window, then lockpicking this gate in our way, letting us grab our first Umbral Gem, easy peasy. Next on our list is the Self-Same Trial, which starts by Burge full stripping much to this little freak's enjoyment. Once the trial is activated, we can put all of our gear back on and head inside where we find a clone of ourselves with absolutely no gear, which means he's as easy as pie to take out, and that's Umbral Gem numero dos acquired. Finally is the Faith Leap Trial, in which we need to cross a room with an invisible pathway. But to make things easy, we start by walking on the path, then jumping up onto the interspersed platforms, followed up by jumping back down onto the path, before finally hopping on up to the end where we grab our third gem. Unfortunately, we need one more, and as we're searching for wherever it is, Burge stumbles across a peculiar ritual circle. Upon interacting with it, a lowly rat threatens to hunt us down, so we show it what for, only to summon a whole horde of other rats. Since there is just so many of them in this fight, we throw on the Holy Lance Helm to make things go a wee bit faster. And after we've committed a decent amount of localized genocide on the rat populace, the final rat turns into a guy, just kind of a dude, who it seems was under some sort of curse. He also seems to have forgotten his manners, as he tries to murder us for lifting this curse. But he really isn't too tough to deal with thanks to a couple smites, a good solid shove off the ledge to the depths below, and a psionic backlash to finish him off. Well, it was certainly an odd detour, but time to get back to finding that fourth gem. Turns out it's not too hard to find as we stumble across it in a room full of devils, one of which is legendary and presumably Raphael's enemy. Before we can do much to talk to him, he starts rambling about some song and contract being completed, and then Raphael just kinda shows up and whisks him away. I get the feeling we'll encounter him again, but for now I'm counting that as a W. Elsewhere in the gauntlet, we stumble across a library filled with more Justiciars who, as you well know by now, really can't do a thing to us. So we just bash him on the head a few times until the room is all cleared out and we're free to roam. By pressing this button in the northwest corner of the room, we open up the locked area, and by putting the book titled Teachings of Loss of the Night Singer on this pedestal, we open up a secret passageway. Inside is some useless spear that doesn't do much, alongside a surprise tool that will help us later, so keep an eye on that. Now, we could go set the ball rolling and head to the depths of the gauntlet, but there's still a few more things our cracked cranium wants to do beforehand, such as freeing the trapped tieflings and gnomes inside Moonrise prisons, starting by taking out the patrolling scrying eyes, though admittedly failing to get both before a couple other folks spot us and join the fight. Either way, we still managed to blow the second one up, and thanks to the help of an invisibility potion, avoid a close call with death and reset the encounter, only to come back a moment later and with the help of minor illusion and a strength elixir, start shoving all the patrolling guards into the abyss below one by one. And to spice things up, we take out a few of the guards the old-fashioned way as well. Once all is said and done, we use the classic warlock pick to blast open the back walls of the prison cells and free our waylaid wanderers. But god, we really should have left some of them to rot. Sorry, moving on. After that, we very quickly jump into the oubliette right by the prison and loot this corpse to unlock Charm, which we really won't be using, but it is better to have than to not. With that, it's time to prepare for our greatest hunt yet, Ketheric Thorm, and to do that, we first need to convince his dog to not slaughter us for breaking into his bedroom. It doesn't go well. For the dog, that is. Shortly after, we find what we were looking for in his chest, a way to emotionally destroy him, since a good hunter defeats their prey in every aspect. To prepare in another way, we also finally buy the Drakethroat Glaive from Roa Moonglow downstairs. This bad boy lets us cast the Elemental Weapon spell once per long rest with no concentration on any weapon that exists nearby, meaning we can just drop our usual weapon on the ground and cast it on that, basically granting us an extra +1 to attack rolls on top of an extra 1d4 of any element we so desire. Definitely should have bought this fine fella a little earlier, but better late than never. After about 30 minutes of shopping for potions, we swing by the center of town and press the panels on the statue in order of north, west, and then east to open a secret passage underground, wherein we find 3 statues that test our charisma, intelligence, and wisdom respectively. Passing each one means we get a +5 to each of those stats till our next long rest. Then we head back to the gauntlet and find yet another Sharan statue to make an ability check against, this one granting resistance to necrotic damage until next long rest, which will also be real handy. With all of our prep work out of the way, it's time to finally find what's at the bottom of this gauntlet, using all of our acquired gems to get there. Waiting for us at the bottom is a portal to the Shadowfell, where no doubt the source of our mark's immortality is coming from. Sure enough, as soon as we arrive on the other side, we find a prison that would have a chance of even holding Burge, and a lone figure is trapped in its depths. A lone figure who very rudely greets us, but at the very least offers to forgive our transgressions. And given that we don't remember most of our transgressions, we figure it's a safe bet to set her free. Thus, Dame Aelin is reborn, and for once in our life, we've got a hunting partner ready to take on Ketheric. Turns out a handful of Harpers have beat us to Moonrise and are also raring to go. Oh, and they left us another little space snack, granting perilous stakes to round us out and get the last of the illithid powers that we can. With us at the head, we charge into Moonrise at last, ready to wreak havoc, only to get instantly shut down with our Eldritch Blast getting counterspelled. But the fight breaks out nonetheless as Harpers get wailed on, Jaheira jumps into maybe the worst location to be, and many a folk gets black-holed and clumped up. In the following round, things continue to go awry, with our hapless Harpers getting hit by Hadar's hunger, not to mention getting terribly distracted by a Guardian of Faith. And to make matters worse, the round after that, Jaheira gets wiped out, making it all the way to round 3 at the very least, which I think is a new record. Although, most of the rest of our fodder also bite the dust this round, which is, well, honestly not that upsetting. We at the very least have a clearer line of sight to keep poking at our enemies, which is what we've been up to so far in case you've been wondering. The baddies are nice enough to use another Hunger of Hadar, blocking the space in between us and them. Then they finish off the 2 remaining Harpers, meaning the real fight can finally begin in proper. The real fight, of course, being us poking them with a blast and then running as far away as we possibly can. Repeat ad infinitum. Okay, admittedly we do a couple bonks here and there if the enemies manage to get close enough, but for the most part it is entirely ranged attacks of some variety. Annoyingly enough, some do come back to life if we kill them outside the safety of the towers, but Shadow-Cursed Undead are no threat to us and often helpful thanks to our Bloodlust elixir. Soon enough the last of them fall and are brought lower than Burge's pants. Then we just need to fight our way up to the rooftop past some Necromancer and her Necromites, which you can bet your bottom gold piece does not take long at all, since she can't do enough damage to scare us by her lonesome. Since we realize that we're very close to a level up, we use an Invis potion and infiltrate the prison again, now occupied by a whole bunch of undead and 3 Necromancers. Shovel gets sent in to surprise them all, and while they're reeling, we try and use Control Undead on the lone Death Shepherd to even the odds, but alas, it doesn't work out. So we follow up with an Ice Storm scroll on a whole bunch of them, taking out some and weakening others, before culling even more with a quick repulsor. Our dear loyal Quasit companion gets bone chilled and evaporated, leaving us to finish off just a few more Necromites, giving us the XP we need, meaning we can just get out of dodge now that we don't need anything else down here, and indulge in our reward of level 9 and 6 in Paladin, which is a huge one for us. First off, level 9 grants a proficiency improvement up to +4, making us better at pretty much everything. Secondly, we get an Aura of Protection, which increases all of our saving throws by an amount equal to our Charisma modifier. You heard me right, that's an extra +5 to every single saving throw we make, forever, always. We just became a whole lot more unkillable. As our burgeoning power blossoms, we at last reach the rooftop and find a cranky Ketheric who is at last mortal. And we get the chance to lunge at his insecurities thanks to that note we stole from his bedroom earlier, essentially just making him feel real bad about himself. Then Aelin shows up to make him real angry and our rooftop rumble commences proper. Since this is a pretty scary fight with not a lot of terrain to use to our advantage, we decide to hide in a darkness cloud for this one. Sestera the Necromancer Necromancer drops a fireball on the Night Song, and the Night Song in turn gets one good hit off on Ketheric before being knocked prone by a shield bash. For now, we just get firing on the Necromites to trigger our Bloodlust Elixir and then trim down the Necromancer's HP so we don't have to worry about getting overwhelmed by summons. Unfortunately, with yet another fireball and a Divine Smite from Papa Thorm himself, Aylin goes down, though she is immortal so she'll be back on her next turn ready to start shoving Bone Boys, before naturally going down to them as well. Our pattern of Eldritch Blasting keeps up when we can, but the Big K prioritizes us and comes into our darkness to whoop some Burge booty, if only he could actually hit us. Either way, Burge gets to finish off that nuisance of a Necromancer, and then starts clobbering Ketheric with a more hands-on approach. He keeps up his tried and true strategy of standing in the darkness and wailing blindly, only for it to rub off on us, and we find ourselves doing the same. Fast forward to when a hit does land, and we crit him all the way into the next cutscene, where he just kinda says he doesn't feel like fighting anymore, whacks Aylin with a giant tentacle, and then teleports both her and himself somewhere underground. Well, I guess we'll just clean up here and catch up in a second. Once we're all done, we hop inside a nearby fleshy hole and get following the trail. While we're down here, we find and free an imprisoned us from way back at the start of Act 1, who gives us the ability to summon them once per short rest on command. Burge also stumbles across a room positively filled to the brim with fiends and undead, waiting to be wiped out. They can't do much to us once we take out the Death Shepherd, so we use our Control Undead ability on it, and then just use the old bonk hammer to settle things as they used to. The Shepherd goes down pretty fast afterwards, but it doesn't matter since so too do all of our foes. We also make a quick note to wipe out as many intellect devourers laying around the place as we can, since the XP they give is just so good. With the area nice and clear, we've got one final showdown to get to, and beforehand we prep by putting on all of our best gear for the job. That's the Dark Justiciar half-plate so we can better keep concentration, Gloves of Heroism to make us tankier, and the Doom Hammer since we get the feeling there's some healing we'll need to stop. And of course the Doom Hammer is getting elemental weapon put on it for good measure. Upon arriving at the bottom, we find Gortash and Orin, the other chosen of the Absolute, in a meeting with Ketheric. Seems like they aren't getting along the best, which might be something we can use to our advantage in the future. But for now, we find out that the Absolute is actually an Elder Brain, a legendary creature, and one that is being controlled by these champions of the Dead 3. They say their farewells pretty soon after the light show is over and leave Ketheric to his brooding. With the potion of invisibility we throw down on both Scratch and ourselves, we get into position, with Scratch by Aylin and us in the perfect spot to smite this Mind Flayer. As soon as we do, Ketheric spots us and starts yapping like crazy. We remind him once more of how we totally made him cry on top of the tower above, and he decides to end it all out of sheer embarrassment. Unfortunately, he gets brought back as the unstoppable godly apostle of Merkel, a god of death, so I guess he's finally worthy prey. When we're back in the fight, Scratch immediately proves himself to be best boy and frees Dame Aylin, making the apostle susceptible to damage. Then we obliterate the Mind Flayer with a crit Divine Smite thanks to a potion of speed, which for some reason doesn't trigger our Bloodlust Elixir. So instead of the Darkness spell, we use a Darkness Arrow to keep Merkel blinded, but this does trigger his legendary action, which is a retaliatory Gaze of the Dead. Since this is a surprise round, none of the baddies get a turn, but Aylin sure does, and she is immediately out for blood. For some reason, the Lord of the Dead also skips his turn on the second round, confusing, but I'm not one to look a gift Merkel in the mouth. On Burge's turn, we cast the spell Darkness, which as it turns out doesn't overwrite the existing shorter timed Darkness Arrow, followed by Spiteful Suffering getting used to trigger our gloves. Passing it back to Merkel, he does finally use a damaging move, but it doesn't even break our temp HP because we're just so good at making saves and have resistance. Back to us, and it's finally time to start wailing with our very first smite being a critical, followed up by 2 regular smites absolutely chunking this poor soul. And we make sure to retake speed potions whenever we need to so we don't get lethargic. Because the Darkness Arrow ran out, he does get to see us for a moment, allowing him to use both Gaze of the Dead and Call of the Damned on us as well, which actually does deal light damage past our temp HP. Next time we can, just to be safe, we make sure to re-blind him with the actual spell Darkness, which should last well past the time this fight is over, only for us to keep smiting away with 1 hit and then temporarily switching to a regular hit, saving spell slots in case we drop concentration. The agonized apostle wails and screams and practically begs for his life at this point, barely tickling us. Seeing this sad display, we throw caution to the wind and go for another Divine Smite, which by pure luck is yet another crit, and then another Divine Smite for huge damage, and at last a solid bonk to finish off poor little Merkel. Aylin does try and pretend that it's her kill at the end, but I think we all know who the master master of this hunt was. Off Kethric's corpse, we grab a rock which our brain is sure that we'll be needing for something, as well as his clothes, more for a temporary switch up in fashion than anything else. When we get back to safety, there's a touching reunion between Aelin and whoever this girl is, but I suppose they'll be traveling with us for now, cause why not? A voice in our head then gives maybe the world's most incorrect pep talk, and as we leave at last towards our much anticipated destination, the shadow curse is lifted thanks to our actions. A thought pierces through the rattling mind of our bumbling Burge. We might just be that 1 in a million trophy hunter that leaves the world better than we found it. After making it out of the gloomy Shadowcurse lands, we find ourselves taking a well-earned sleep just a day out from our final destination when all of a sudden we're assaulted by Gangly Githyanki. We had a feeling this was going to happen, but alas, we cannot prepare for this fight at all, so we just get tussled around a little bit, before we're able to Misty Step far away, and then with the help of a speed potion, speed on over to the portal that they left open. When we arrive on the other side, we find a legendary creature that someone beat us to hunting, which makes Burge very distraught. As well as a bunch more Gith, which always makes anyone distraught, punching through a barrier that protects our dream visitor who is in desperate need of aid. Since we finally got the chance, we do our daily preparations, buffing up as much as we can and getting a couple summons out with us making their first appearance. Then Shovel gets a surprise round on the Gith nearby. Burge enters the fight wailing away, landing a bash, and then pulling off a stage fright on the both of them. Meanwhile, us proves that they're pretty much just going to be a distraction, unfortunately. Thankfully, one of the enemies skips their turn for some reason, and the other obliterates their own health by missing 4 times in a row. The following round, we keep up our wonderful whacking, and Mrs. Misser manages to miss herself to an early grave. And it turns out us might just have a little bit of a kick to them too. Shortly after, we arrive inside the central area, just in time to see a friendly Mind Flayer getting their hind flayed, since as it turns out they've got a super important Gith imprisoned here. This really does seem like an ask questions later type of encounter, so Burge goes with his brain's first thought and jumps into action. To start, we throw a speed potion on the Emperor, that's our tentacular bosom buddy, as well as down one ourselves. Then we just get a bonking, dealing a little bit of damage to one of the fellas in the thick of it, inspiring the local intellect devourers to do likewise and start eating good. They do, however, get pummeled a wee bit in return, and obliterated by wind, as well as melted by fire. The Emperor gets a killer double stun off on 2 on the ground before completely wasting his extra action doing basically nothing. Either way, Burge still takes advantage of our manipulative mate's moves and takes one of them out. Our otherworldly assailants do their best to harm any of us, but it's quickly becoming apparent that these fellas are not cut out for this line of work. Neither really is our ally though, as he once again uses the move that does borderline nothing before using telekinesis on literally nothing. Wanting to hurry this fight along, we start going for super smites on the big boss, taking out most of their HP in one turn. We did unfortunately fail to refresh our speed pots at this point, meaning the enemies get a lot of time to wail on us, but they're also far too incompetent to capitalize on this time, letting us get back into the action and show their boss what for. Out of rage, they get their revenge on Shovel, which finally motivates the Emperor enough to actually use a damaging move. And with the enemies all low HP, we play a quick game of Whack-A-Gith to finish things off. After the fight is over, we learn this guy is the source of us being able to resist the Absolute, and this guy is actually our Dream Visitor's true form and has been protecting us. Now, we're not the biggest fan of being manipulated and lied to, so despite him not being legendary, we still get a bit of an urge to hunt the Emperor, though that'll have to wait till we can free Orpheus. In the meantime, he gives us a way to mangle our mind even further, which naturally gives more power, turning us into a half Illithid, granting us access to all tier 3 Illithid powers, including the ability to permanently fly. These can get a little bit bonkers, so stay tuned for when they make their appearances. With all our midnight murdering out of the way, we settle back in bed for a slumber party with the Gith outside. And when we awake the next day, we head towards the outskirts of Baldur's Gate, where we're set upon by a child of all things. God knows why it'd approach us, but we give it a grilled miniature giant space hamster and send it on its way. Unfortunately, as we try and get into the city, we find the way in is closed because Gortash is getting coronated here, just kinda on the outskirts, I guess. But they're easily convinced that with how freaky we look, we're the new royal occultist, which is definitely a real profession. As soon as we head inside though, we get real feel sleepy, and yet another voice in our head tells us our dad, Baal, god of murder, will only love us if we kill our niece cousin Orin, which we were planning on doing anyways. So I guess we weren't just a regular big game hunter after all, but maybe that's what we can choose to be. Either way, we continue onwards and find Gortash, who is very happy to see us, and he also asks us to kill Orin for him since I guess people really dislike her. We agree and stick around for his coronation before we can get heading into the city proper. Don't worry, we'll be back for old Gordy. And the first thing we do inside the city is break into a wizard tower and grab a surprise tool that will help us later. The second thing we do is visit our old friend Damon to buy the Armor of Persistence. This bad boy is our endgame armor with a whopping 20 AC, reduces all damage by 2 on top of permanent resistance for 1d4 bonus to all saves and Blade Ward for resistance to all physical damage. It's really hard to overstate how good this armor is. It is almost undoubtedly the best in the game, and if you thought we were unkillable before, we're now a complete juggernaut. Next on our list of power-ups involves heading to the circus and talking to Boney of Stony and Boney's Creations, who we can commission a statue from that grants us sweet stone features, aka a permanent bless effect for yet another 1d4 to our saves, and also our attack rolls. As we wait for it to be delivered to camp, we head to bed and find a haggard Halsin about to put down our dog. Something is a little off though. He's being quite the drama queen, and we only know one person who's this dramatic about everything. Yep, turns out it's Orin, who doesn't realize brain damage gives strength in this world, and also asks us to kill Gortash and then herself, because I guess everyone really does dislike her. We agree since she's got Halsin kidnapped and call it a night. The morning after, we decide to see if we can get another voice in our head by bribing a god at the Stormshore Tabernacle, which just ends up granting the Anointed in Splendor permanent buff, for a +2 boost to our saving throws, because by golly, if Burge ever fails a save again, I will simply lose it. In case you're wondering what the saves are looking like right now, here they are, not to mention the advantage on all mental saves since we're a gnome. With power in tow, we follow the trail towards a legendary creature under Worm's Rock Fortress, revealing a hidden passageway in the prison by hitting these torches with lightning. Once on the inside, we've got to prove ourselves worthy of the hunt by completing a few trials. First of which, we just need to survive a few rounds while holding this here torch. As you can imagine, it's really not that hard. Some enemies do a bit of chip, but we can always heal ourselves up. Before you know it, challenge 1 is done. Trial 2 has us up against the hardest odds yet, a chess puzzle. Our brain rages and revolts as Burge focuses, and with the help of the voices in our head, we solve even this incredible task. The third task involves us killing one of 3 ghosts, just gotta make sure it's the right one. So we trust our gut and swing at whoever is closest. Last up, we walk into a room and find a cursed fella who is easily cured, and once he's gone, we grab a painting of a cell and put it front and center. Just like that, we're all done. All of this grants enough XP for level 10 and 7 in Paladin, granting yet another second level spell slot as well as our 7th level subclass feature, Aura of Hate. This bad boy gives us and any fiends or undead wielding weapons a damage boost equal to our charisma modifier, essentially giving a +5 to all of our weapon damage, hopefully speeding up some fights. We've also opened up the doorway to the depths, and upon descending, find our mark already dead. Ah, dang it. Oh well, guess we'll just have to move on. In all seriousness, we'll be skipping this fight because I find it incredibly boring and it hasn't changed much from previous difficulties. Likewise, we'll be skipping Ethel in this act since it's very similar to the last time we saw her. We do at the very least find the Helm of Baldur in here. This does replace our Diadem of Arcane Synergy, so we have less damage, but it increases our survivability, which is the name of the game. With this, we now heal 2 HP each round, have a +1 to our AC and saving throws, as well as stun and crit immunity, so we take damage less often and heal up what little chip we may take. I'd say we're pretty tanky, but there's room for improvement. Regardless, to test our strength, we track down a gang fight going down, and if we had any aspersions in need of assuaging, this guy gets rid of them for us. Right off the bat, we can see just how incredible this build has become. Any attack rolls made against us miss. Even bombs hardly do a thing thanks to our incredible saving throws, and guaranteed hits like Magic Missile are made redundant by our damage reduction. All in all, most enemies can't do a thing to us. We in turn still have incredible single target damage, and now we also have the ability to crowd control enemies with a bonus action thanks to Black Hole, which pulls and slows. These boorish bandits never even knew what hit them. Burge also does a few side quests, including convincing a mud wizard to not trap us forever in a muddy tomb, stopping an elaborate death cult themed bank robbery so that we can rob it ourselves, use one of the books we found in the wizard tower earlier to decipher the rest of the necromancy of Thay, which lets us cast Danse Macabre once per long rest, free Volo from yet another group of cultists on the verge of lynching him, and track down some more cultists so that we can hunt some more of the most dangerous game. With all of our misadventures out of the way, we get enough experience for level 11 and 8 in Paladin, letting us get the tough feat. Since most of our defensive bases are covered at this point and we're not wanting too much for damage, one of the best choices we can make is just getting more HP to make sure a streak of bad luck doesn't down us before we can heal back up. Now that we're officially physically tough, we head to the House of Grief to see if some therapy can get us emotionally tough. Unfortunately, as we're confronting our self-image issues, we realize this is all a scam as they're detecting our thoughts. Turns out it's yet another cult lurking beneath the city, and one that is led by a legendary creature, Viconia Devere. You know what that means? We follow them into the basement and send Shovel to get a surprise round. Fortunately for us, as we start blasting, no legendary actions are triggered, since without having completed the therapy session, they've got no hold over us. They don't need much of a hold over Shovel to blast her to bits though. Meanwhile, we keep firing away while we patiently await for them to get grouped up in one big clump. Sure enough, they spend the next round dashing into a horrible position where we can hit them with a black hole to make it even worse for them, before unleashing the wrath of a wall of fire scroll to create a bunch of crispy cultists. Many an enemy burns to bits as they struggle to get past the wall, and those that do reach attack range naturally fail to hit. All the while, we keep pacing backwards and using black holes to keep them clumped, so that we can blast them with whatever strong AoE scrolls we've got laying around. After rinsing and repeating for a few rounds, culling the masses in the process, we figure it's time to bring back the single target damage. And Viconia finally reaches us to trade a 10 damage Blight, thanks to a necrotic resistance elixir, for a 24 damage psionic backlash. Which, as far as Burge is concerned, is still too much damage to our side, so we get our revenge before she can do it again. A couple whacks here, and a few whacks there, and the rest of these Sharan charlatans follow their leader to an early grave. First Act 3 hunt, down for the count. From her corpse, we loot Viconia's walking fortress, a 3 AC shield that gives a damaging shield bash, as well as advantage on saves against all spells, and spell attack rules against us have disadvantage. It also lets us use Reflective Shell once per short rest, which reflects projectiles for a couple turns. All in all, this is absolutely insane. We do lose out on the reeling, but believe me, that is a small price to pay for all the other effects that come with this aptly named fortress. While we get exploring the rest of this area, we stumble across a note that details a mirror that steals memories. A moment later, we find said mirror, and since we know losing bits of our memory makes us stronger, we decide to give it a whirl. Well, there's a reason that we've been saving inspiration. Upon succeeding, we get to trade in a temporary -2 to one stat for a permanent +2 to another. Naturally, we choose Charisma, setting us up to 22 and making us better at everything. And since we've pretty much got all of our build's final gear, we head to the local dye shop for a glamorous golden makeover. Once that's done, we also finally embrace our bald urge, so our dome is just as shiny as our armor. Now, we are truly unstoppable. Makeover completed, we follow our instincts to the next big trail and get Shovel to trigger an obvious trap in the sewers that summons a horde of undead, to which we join the fight a moment later. The mummies really try to frighten us, but with us having advantage and insane boost to our saves, nothing happens. The crawling claws, on the other hand, for whatever reason deal damage even when they miss. Not a lot of damage, but enough to warrant focusing them down first, out of spite if nothing else. We also can't cast spells here without taking damage due to this area's ambient effect, so we've just gotta bop them all down one at a time until they're all taken care of. Then we get looking for what we came here for, a passive check that we critically fail. Okay, cool. What do we do now? Scratch can't sense anything either. A bomb reveals nothing, but we can summon us on the other side of the wall. Maybe if we can summon us, we can also Misty Step through to the other side. Remember kids, walls are only solid if you let them be. And on the other side, we find what we're looking for, a brain of a legendary creature, as well as their liver, since this bad boy is sort of a lich with their body parts all spread out. In the city's mortuary cellars, we find the old fellow's lungs. And inside a dude named Thrumbo by the beach, we find his heart. Listen, I swear, Thrumbo had to go. It'll be worth it. Once we've got all the miscellaneous parts, we do what any good Samaritan would do and blow them up in one big pile at our camp. Now that our mark is vulnerable, we track them down to Philgrave's mansion, where we send in Shovel to get a surprise round on the Mystic Carrion himself, before the Baldur gets in there to unleash a Super Smite, followed up by a regular one, dealing about 140 damage between them. He does have a legendary action, but it only triggers when we hurt his allies who are otherwise occupied, which means we just focus on the big man and obliterate him on our next turn before he can do a thing. From here on out, it's a regular mummy massacre. These ancient undead all get wiped out in a few rounds to the sheer might of Burge. Our desire to massacre undead is not quite sated yet, and our urge takes us towards the Tsar Palace. And even if we weren't an experienced hunter, the bats, red and gold decor, and ominous paintings would surely give away that this is a vampire's lair. To get past the security, we first need to break into a dead girl's room and read her diary. Then bully an old man in the cellar who is as skinny as bones, to steal his jewelry, naturally. With those two ingredients gotten, we can now open the sinister door, only to walk in on the 10th annual Furballs Gate convention, that by necessity demands no witnesses. This fight is made especially easy by a bloodlust elixir, but regardless, I'm pretty sure these frightening furries couldn't actually hit us anyways. On round 2, we also obliterate most of the fight with a powerful repulsor, and a couple whacks later take out the rest of the animalistic adversaries, which is enough for our final level up and 9 in Paladin, granting us 2 level 3 spell slots and the accompanying spells, a couple of which are handy, but most notably of them is Blinding Smite, essentially a replacement for Thunderous Smite that does a bit more damage when we want to go for a Super Smite for just a little bit more burst potential. Continuing on, we head downstairs where we find victims of the vampire who rules over this place begging for aid. And strangely enough, we feel an urge to almost help them. So we prepare to fight Kazdor Sar by conjuring some scintillating sunlight, as well as the Burge squad, so we're as prepared as can be. Then we sneak up and blast him, which doesn't start the fight, but a bat spotting us a moment later does. The Vampire Lord uses Blight on us to start, which does so much damage with his ritual active, so we use Psionic Dominance, essentially a counterspell to stop him in his tracks. Meanwhile, we send Shovel to stand on the part of the ritual that grants Papa Sar improved healing each turn. Chatterteeth, the skeletal spellcaster, uses Eye Bite to try and knock us asleep, but as previously mentioned, any saves really won't have any effect on us at all. When it's back to us, we use a speed potion and dash to get all the way to this strangely weak vampire spawn at the end, who seems a little familiar. Ah well, best to blast away just in case. Then, naturally, we pick up his corpse, stuff it in a pouch that was saved for just this occasion, and send it to camp, also Kazdor can't revive him later. Unfortunately, this is super buggy, and he's still getting the unique buff for Asterion being in the ritual. Regardless, we just CC all the enemies with a black hole. There's not much we can do as the voracious vampire uses Blight on us a second time, but thankfully with a necrotic resistance elixir we don't take too much damage. In case you're wondering, us is having their own boss battle as this goes down. Meanwhile, we're taking advantage of the enemies being all clumped up by getting them with an Ice Storm scroll, followed up by a beautiful Mind Blast destroying most and stunning the survivors. Also, I have no idea why, but for whatever reason Kazdor's legendary action hasn't made an appearance this fight. Normally, it would deal a bunch of damage and push us whenever we get too close, for example, to beat up Chatterteeth and a ghoul. The big man does at the very least try and whack us down the old-fashioned way as a bunch of backup bats get ready for battle. He is unfortunately resistant to most of our damage, so the whacking is pretty slow going, and just out of curiosity we fly far away and then back into melee to try and forcefully trigger the legendary action, which stings for a whole bunch. Let's just eat some dwarf from Act 1 to heal up without using any actions, and then make sure to refresh our speed pot. Whether he's casting Blight or calling lightning, this poor old fella just can't deal enough damage to us to be any real threat, though us is not as impervious. Still, since we don't need to worry about the goons, we focus on the big man, eventually going for a new and improved Super Smite showing off the true potential we possess, and a regular old smite right afterwards to avenge our culled cranial comrade. bad. The thugs remaining, as you'd imagine, die much quicker than their boss. We finish off the job in his coffin, since you never know with these vampires, and remembering that we can use our hunting prowess for good, we free the imprisoned victims of Mr. Sar. Now it's about time we start focusing on the real big game, and to make sure things don't go awry while we hunt the Steel Watch, we buy some flash blinders from Bumpnagel. And after that, we just need to sneak our way into the Steel Watch foundry. Upon getting inside, we send in Shovel to get a jump on the slave drivers here. Unfortunately, the slaves prefer to side with their masters. Ah well, if they get in our way, that's really more on them, especially since they decide to destroy Shovel. Once we kill a few of the actual baddies, they drop a detonator to kill all the captive gnomes, which gets them asking for our help. Upon saving them, they do actually join our side for a bit, and these guards are all cleaned up. Then we come across a problem in the form of this guy who won't tell us the password to blow up the foundry because his people will get mass murdered or something lame like that. So we do what we must for the greater good, and reanimate his corpse to get it to tell us how to do what we came here for. When we go downstairs, we find yet another set of watchers, slave drivers, and our poor enslaved kin. Of course, we're not one for wanton violence, so we do our best to prioritize the slavers, taking them all out while leaving our gnomish compatriots alive. Only these guys seem to have a bit of Stockholm and are trying to avenge their bosses. You know what that means? We do what we must for the hunt and the greater good. In the final room of this compound, Shovel gets the drop on 3 Hellfire Watchers, only for a Hellfire Steel Watcher Titan to rise from the depths. On our first turn, we use a speed potion and absorb intellect on one of the Watchers, which will guaranteed kill it after a few turns since their intelligence is just so low. Then we get bashing on the closest authoritarian automaton while using a flash blinder to make it malfunction. Our foes don't do much to us in return, though that should not be surprising by now. We keep up the blinders and the bonking for another turn to buy us some time, only to use a divine smite on a lucky crit the round after, which causes that particular watcher to detonate themselves at the same time another collapses to absorb intellect. Eventually, the remaining Hellfire Watcher does use Hellfire Exhaust, which is a super lame ability that deals a bunch of unmitigatable fire damage. Thankfully, we have HP to spare, and we get our revenge after just a couple turns. Now all that's left is the Titan, and even though we do a less than great amount of damage to it, it does literally 0 damage to us, so this is just a battle of attrition. To make matters worse, this thing has a defensive mode that makes us deal no damage, while healing it for a pretty solid amount. Regardless, it eventually triggers its own self-detonation process, though it kindly waits to blow up until we've gotten to safety. With everything out of the way, we punch in the code and get her running. The shapeshift makes us look real awkward. I swear we know how to run. Since Gortash's Steel Watch has been dealt with, it's time for the final confrontation, as always initiated by our covert companion Shovel. Starting off, we use a chain lightning scroll to obliterate the defensive shell that grants Gortash resistance to most damage. Meanwhile, the enemies spend their turns giving each other pats on the back for a job not done. The first priority of any fight like this is almost always to thin down the action economy, so we start with the little guys. Unfortunately, this is something Gortash evidently understands as well. Burge continues to take out all of Gordy's goons, while the Tyrant keeps blasting us away with a little bit of chip damage here and there. Regardless, it's not enough to stop us, or even really slow us down, thanks to our hefty healing potion stock. When they're all dealt with, our priority switches to the solitary Archduke, and after getting a few hits on him, he enters his second phase, granting temp HP, new moves, and the ability to punch, well, still pretty bad. We get a crit smite on our next turn, which triggers his legendary action, essentially inflicting a curse upon us that if we don't cure in the next 2 turns, will deal 20 to 200 force damage. But we came prepared with a bunch of remove curse scrolls, so even this all-powerful attack is ineffective. To speed things up, we use a super smite on one of the following turns, make sure we don't get one shot, and finish him off the turn after that, without forgetting to remove the last curse he put on us so we don't die to a post-mortem attack. That's a major hunt down for the count, and our blasted brain makes sure we grab his netherstone to add to our collection. Next up, we gotta find a way to get to Orin, something our thoughts seem to know instinctually. All we gotta do is shoot this corpse and its blood opens the way to our destination. In the next room, we see clear signs of an ambush, so we go invisible and fly past the whole thing. As we arrive at the family estate, this little gremlin is waiting for us to open the door, so our duel can commence as soon as possible. We find Orin easy peasy with a whole audience prepared to watch what's about to go down, but first we've got to persuade her to not murder Halson, since this boy boy can't seem to get out of a bind on his lonesome. And at last, it all clicks and we remember in proper how Orin stabbed through our brain thoughts and made us all mangled. Which means now, it's time for a hunt. And this time, it's personal. Things kick off and she immediately uses an ability that is guaranteed damage, but really not a lot thanks to our resistance. When Burge hits her, she also gets a guaranteed hit as retaliation thanks to her legendary action, but that too is pretty low damage. Our Super Smite, on the other hand, is not pretty low damage. Since there's such a huge disparity between our two damage outputs, it only takes a couple more smites to prove Orin was never worthy of being Baal's chosen. We, on the other hand, have seemed to finally gotten our old man's attention, and at last he deigns to speak to us. He thinks he owns us. He thinks all we are is what we were made to be, but even our mangled mind knows better. And so, we reject him. And so, the Baldurge II meets his untimely demise and joins his predecessor in the annals of history. Except, we don't. The spooky skeleton that's been watching us sleep this whole time shows up and using his mysterious magic brings us back to finish our good hunt, and finish it we will. But first, we need to grab our hard-earned reward, the final nether stone which we'll need to take out the nether brain. Then we head to a place called the Murder Tribunal, where we've got some unfinished business. The leader of the tribunal is Serafok Anchev, a failed ball spawn like ourselves, though his case was not by choice, and we're here to rub it in. He lunges towards us as a tussle begins, missing both attacks. Then one of his cronies uses Sanctuary and Warding Bond on him. So we go after one of the other underlings and thanks to the help of a speed pot, take him out instantly. When they go down, Serafok gains a +6 bonus to his AC for the rest of the fight. The last goon in the round also casts haste on the ferocious fighter to make him swing 4 times around, most of which he misses, but he does land 1 attack. Before we take out the haster, which does make the haste on Serafok permanent, but c'est la vie. He continues to land 1 hit around on us, and the last Echo casts Sanctuary yet again just to be a nuisance. But either way, we manage to take that one out on our next turn, which gives Serafok the ability to heal 2d12 each time he lands a hit for the rest of the fight. Then we use our Dreadful Aspect to frighten the old sport, which does trigger his legendary action. This lets us simply end our turn at a distance, and since he's frightened, he can't move to hit us at all. And now we get into a slugfest with the baseball spawn, followed up by using Stage Fright to make all of his many misses deal damage to himself. Even though neither of us are likely to hit at this point, we all know when it comes down to a one-on-one slugfest, Burge is the safe bet. That's 1 more legendary hunt down and just a couple more to go. Our penultimate hunt is found in Sheres's Caress in the form of Raphael, who we can't wait to finish off. We can't really hurt him here though, so we're forced to hear him out about offering us the Orphic Hammer, which we can use to free Orpheus in exchange for control of the nether brain. Burge is really not that stupid, so we decline his offer and elect to find another way to screw this guy over. Sure enough, as we're mulling it over, Yurgir shows up at our camp, more than willing to tell us all about how to make Raphael's day worse. When we ask him why, it turns out he's a rather kindred spirit who gets what the hunt is all about. The next morning, we get preparing and stumble across quite the sight. That is, someone turning into a mind flayer at a less than fortunate time. No need to worry though, since Burge is here to save the day. Our reward for saving this kind lady is Rapture, a 1d6 bonus to all of our rolls for the rest of the day. Now we're off to go see Helsik, who as it turns out recognizes us from before we lost our memories, and seems to already know that we'd love to break into Raphael's House of Hope. After a bit of convincing to waive the devilish fee, she gives us all we need to open a portal. But before that, it seems only fitting for us, having reclaimed our mind, our past, and our destiny, to also reclaim our oath for the very end. And just like that, it's time for our hardest hunt yet. Here we come, Raphael. As we enter through the portal, we're greeted by Hope of House of Hope fame, who is kind enough to give us a disguise when we make clear our intentions to free her. A disguise that we almost immediately rip off when we steal some mighty fine looking loot from Rafi's archives. Meaning we've got to kill some fiendish foes, and since we can't kill Baal, God of Murder, we'll take take out all of our rage on Ball Hellsphere. These hallways are filled to the brim with all sorts of baddies, including one dude who strangely looks a lot like Raphael but goes down like the rest of them and drops a handy looking key that lets us open up a hidden secret safe containing a note that holds the password to break the barrier around the Orphic Hammer. So we go back and grab that bad boy and then head downstairs to go beat up Hope's jailers, a couple spectators, and a host of imps. Which is as easy as pie. Just like that, Hope is free and we head back to the boudoir to use the fountain that restores all our lost resources. To prepare for the return of the master of the house, we throw on the amulet of greater health. Hope casts Bless and then turns invisible and runs as far away as she can, while we use Sanctuary on ourselves granted by our restored oath. Then as we head for the exit, who should return but Raphael, alongside this random low health goon and our old mate Yurgir. Raffi just has to have his villain monologue ranting and raving about the follies of humanity and all that stuff, but our hunting pal interjects with some BM of his own, making it clear he's on our side. And just like that, down comes the claw. Yurgir goes first and instantly blows up whoever that lady was, then turns his sights on another unfortunate soul. They do in return gang up on him, hurting him real bad. Our grand plan kicks off with Burge getting as far away as we can, hopefully luring the enemies out with us. Though this does have the unintended side effect of them ganging up on Yurgir further, who they dastardly disintegrate after a couple turns. With him out of the way, almost all the Cambions follow us out of the room, leaving only Raphael who's not in pursuit. To try and get him out too, we reveal Shovel, but forget that bringing her into combat breaks Hope's turn-based mode as well, and her invisibility runs off. Shovel does not last long at all, and Hope follows suit, barely taking 3 attacks to kill. Oh well, we tried. When it becomes clear Raphael is not coming out of his hole, we get back into the groove with a stage fright and the usual accompanying bonks. Just like most of our foes, these fiends can't hit us at all, especially so with protection from evil and good active. Finally, Raphael thinks maybe he should help his goons and shows up outside, so we fly back inside the Soul Pillar room with a speed pot, shut the doors, and seal them with an arcane lock. Now we have free reign to ruin Raphael's day by breaking all the pillars which boost his damage and give him legendary actions, turning him into just kind of a guy. Then we summon as many fellas as we can with Danse Macabre, and also us shows up. A couple of these ghouls really want out though. They simply need it. I kid you not, this went on for 46 seconds. They really needed to get out of there. And a few rounds later, they get what they wanted as the arcane lock expires and all hell breaks loose. Raphael immediately cooks most of them, but they do explode on death for pretty good damage, letting us clean up a few of his worthless wastrels and making sure to heal up so we don't get one shot. Regardless, a couple turns later, the last of his goons go down and he expends the last of his soul charges. So he's stuck merely unleashing 6 melee attacks on us each round like some kind of common chump. And as we all know, if you're watching a 1v1 and you're a betting man, you bet on the Bald Urge II. 1 down and 1 final hunt to go. We track down the nether brain to its lair in the stinky sewers, whereupon it pulls us into its even stinkier psyche. It very quickly becomes apparent that our master plan of throwing a bunch of shiny rocks at the brain may have been poorly thought out. Thankfully, right before it gets us, the Emperor comes to our rescue, whisking us to safety and letting the brain know
this is not over.
But hey, this is a fantastic opportunity to finally free Orpheus, which gets the Emperor real salty and he decides his odds of survival are better off against us, which I mean, come on dude. We get to free an Orpheus and he is less than happy about having to work with us, which is honestly just so rude. Either way, he reveals that one of us will need to become a mind flayer to throw the rocks good enough to hurt the nether brain. But this is our hunt and we've made it this far. It's time to see it through, even if it means we must become an illithid. And it seems we haven't a moment to spare. Continuing on, we stumble across a random guard giving a heroic speech to our allies, that being Withers and Halsin's arm apparently. This situation clearly requires us to swoop in and deliver the speech of a lifetime, to which the crowd goes wild. Along the way to the brain, a true hero falls, that being Matthew the Guard, so naturally we start wreaking our vile vengeance across the Absolute's amassed army with our brand new evolved form. Such a hero will be remembered. Next, we just gotta get to the base base of the brain, while a nautiloid fires down at us. Since we can fly, this is actually insanely easy. It's just a couple button presses to get to the top. It's do or die time, so we prep in every way we can. We summon as many fellas as we can think of, stack as many spells as we can think of, down universal resistance elixirs for both ourselves and Orpheus, and do the old dash before entering a new area to get double movement speed trick. When we get to the top, who should show up but the Emperor? We're about to show him just how poorly he judged his odds. Orpheus instantly uses his funny gith mobility to jump well past the brain's wrinkles, and Burge starts by bullying a couple of the enemy mind flayers with black holes. Our summons do pretty good with the distraction duty, and the brain itself uses its legendary action to zap the both of us, while dazing and giving us weak grip. Next round we use a Featherfall scroll right next to the brain to bait out a bunch of counterspells, letting the O-Man cast Globe of Invulnerability scot-free. Since we're safe and sound in here, we can blast away some more mind flayers with impunity, much to the Emperor's chagrin. Over the next couple turns, we stack 5 whole instances of Fierce Perilous Stakes on ourselves, each one granting an extra 15 psychic to each instance of damage that we deal. Then we channel the stones and brace ourselves. The portal opens up without incident, and this is it. We stand on the verge of greatness. But just because we can, we stack up a few more Fierce Perilous Stakes, and then use that surprise tool from the Wizard Tower, an Artistry of War scroll, to deal a whole lot of damage to our final hunt. A sense of overwhelming completion radiates through our body. At last, our hunt is over. Our urge for now is sated, our past known, and the world saved. But even with the brain dealt with, what if we can't control our new form? What if we once again give in to a dark urge? The bald truth is that we don't know if we could stop ourselves. And so at last, something finally hits the Baldurge II, as the only hunter who could have stopped him finishes the greatest hunt the world has ever known. Thank you for watching this feature-length cut of Burge's adventures. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for everyone who voted on the poll for our next run. We'll be doing a Lonewolf Druid starting roughly 27 hours after this video comes out. And as always, a special thanks to our storyteller tier members, Bunny Warren, Damon, Larry Renzokukin, Shirtles, Mark Rainbow, Vivian, Garrett Sapp, Rat King, Lovely Velvet, Apricot Antlers, Beltfed Joe, Lumina, Chance Hine, and Steven SSD.